Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another podcast of the DecisionTech series, sponsored by Arrows Group. It's me, Charlie Sell, the MD for Arrows Group. And this podcast series is aimed at all you STEM graduates out there at various universities, predominantly our sponsored ones, to say this is what the future technology is looking like. So really pleased to have Richard Halliwell with me today. Richard is the CTO at DecisionTech. They're part of the Money Supermarket Group, probably a household name and brand now. So I can imagine a lot going on there, and DecisionTech specifically. So hi, Richard.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Yeah, how are you today?
Very, very hot. I don't know how it is where you are, but it is boiling here.
Yeah, I have to say, this podcast episode, we're recording it on the hottest day, or one of the hottest days of the year, aren't we? So,
absolutely.
So everyone out there, excuse if you can hear fans and aircon going on.
Or see me sweating away.
So the first question I ask everyone who joins the podcast series, and something that's really interesting to many people listening, is a bit about your story. How did you get into technology and became the CTO at DecisionTech? So
I don't know how common this is as a story. I thought about this when I saw that you were going to ask this question. I tried to write down what it was that got me into tech. So from the very top, I suppose, as a kid, I started about the age of 10 or something on my dad's laptop, trying to work out how QBasic works. I can't tell you like why I bothered doing that. It just seemed like something that I wanted to do. My dad isn't a computer scientist. It was just something that I was interested in. I went to a school that was really supportive of doing computery type things. I never really studied computer science in a formal way. You know, there are A-levels where you can do computer studies or engineering or that kind of, and I never really did that. I did a lot of maths, but generally at school, I was working with the sysadmins and the other people. I did a little bit of web development for them, helped them out with some very small bits of their website. And really, they were sort of supporting me through that. I suppose then I found a niche. I quite liked doing things. I was motivated by things that other people could see. So I suppose it was a natural progression into brands and into web development. When I was sort of the end of secondary school, being university, and the first couple of years at uni, I set myself up as a sole trader, and I was working for an American company who were building intranets. And that was quite fun. That kind of prepped me quite well for remote work. It suited me because I'm a bit of a night owl anyway, so I had to work on sort of American hours. So I'd be working until 3 o'clock in the morning. And I built a lot of management ability there, but also a lot of coding ability. Then I went to uni. I went to UCL. I picked the UCL course because they were very upfront about being an engineering course. And, having worked out that I was really motivated by building things, I felt that was the right fit for me. When I joined the course, I thought the material was really well structured. And I was able to sort of try out lots of different things. It was quite Java heavy, but I suppose generally people end up pretty language fluent these days anyway. So it didn't matter too much. I remember vividly my final year project, I wanted to do something using virtual reality and image recognition, which was just something I was interested in. It wasn't something I had any experience in. And this was kind of before Xbox Connect was doing that kind of thing. So they had this like lab, and I put 2 webcams, one above and one behind, and I videoed my friend doing lots of different positions to try and see if I could make that like form the input for a game. And I remember I went to see this supervisor, and he said, "This is great, yeah, we can do this, but you're going to have to do it in C++. At this point, I knew .NET and I knew Java. I had no clue about C++. And I remember probably about 2 months in my final year sitting in Cafe Nero in Camden, really worrying I didn't know how to do C++, reading the manual, trying to work out how to do it from first principles. But again, I guess I was motivated by the end goal.
Yeah.
And it went well. So I finished up there, worked totally irrelevantly as a waiter for 2 months, which is great. I'd really recommend that to a graduate. Like, go and do something that builds your soft skills. Go and do something related but not related. Go and work in an office. Go and meet people. And then my first job, I went to a recruitment company on Tottenham Court Road, to a graduate recruitment company. And I remember the guy said, due to my experience where I've been working in university. He was like, well, unfortunately, you're a bit too experienced for the graduate recruitment company, so you've got to go to the adult recruitment company next door. And then I got there and he said, I think I've got a job for you. I've been trying to fill it for 3 months. Go now, the interview's in 10 minutes. So I had to walk down Tottenham Court Road on a day almost as hot as today. He was filling me in on the company. I got to the door and he said, it's an informal dress code. So at that point, I took my tie off, because I was wearing my suit, and landed that job. So that was VideoJug. VideoJug were a media company. It was a job that, I looked at other options, but I went for them ultimately because it sounded fun. It sounded sexy. I suppose that's something that I've learned doesn't really count for much later on. So I worked there as a junior dev. It was a really good team. They had a lot of senior developers there. It wasn't a huge team. And I picked that because I guess I've learned you probably don't want to be the smartest person in the team or you're not going to be progressing. Definitely, I wanted somewhere where it wasn't a formal graduate program, but there was definitely those guys were willing to invest time in me. And ultimately I was there for 7 or 8 years and I finished up there as head of development.
Wow.
So that was fun and a great company. Unfortunately, they never really made the money that they were hoping to make. So it was a sad day at the end where they were pivoting the company away from being video hosting to video production. So I suppose I left there learning the lesson that maybe it's not all about, the concept. Maybe the slightly less sexy sectors are the way to go.
Yeah.
So, sorry, very long-winded story. Moving on to DecisionTech. So when I first started with them, I was looking at 3 different roles. One for a well-known search engine, one for a well-known table booking company, and the third one was consumer choices, or broadband choices as they were known, which wasn't the most compelling proposition, I'll be honest. And I think I remember in the interview telling the chap that interviewed me, who is now my boss, that, sounded all right. I wasn't really that bought into it, probably more interesting things to be doing. But I felt that I could really turn their technology around. I felt, what I'd learned, first principles, what I knew looked good, I could do there. And actually the domain didn't really matter that much to me because I was going to build great ways of doing things with a great team. That company went really well. I started there as team leads, then head of development, now CTO. We were able to pivot that company. We moved it from, it still does broadband comparison, but we rebranded it to DecisionTech because we wanted to make technology the primary push of that company. We hired some fantastic developers. We run an all senior team. So I went from very briefly being sort of good within an average team where I was quite uncomfortable because I was looking to learn from me, back to the uncomfortable position of working with people that are much more skilled than me, that I learn from every day. And then we got bought. So we got bought 2.5 years ago by Money Supermarket Group, which is a great acquisition. We obviously do broadband comparison and mobile comparison, and now we do energy comparison, and we do our own brands, but we also do their B2B part. So I've been working for them for the last 2.5 years, but still within DecisionTech, a company within a company.
Yeah, fantastic. So it's really interesting what you said earlier, though, about when you were studying and you did your course in Java and then C++, and you had to suddenly go into C#. And something that I've seen with a lot of clients evolving is the whole polyglot engineering concept, that actually traditionally when we were at university, you were told to be a specialist in Java or one language and become the best. But what I'm seeing, and I don't know if you agree now, that actually what employers are looking for is people who can learn the full stack. People who can do front end, back end, people who are probably got a bit more of a wider skill set. Is that something that you look for as well, or think about when you think of sort of the emerging technologies?
So it's interesting. It's quite a polarizing topic. When you talk about full stack, I was talking to someone about this just before, and I said I thought full stack was really important, and we only hire full stack people where we can. And they sort of pulled a face, and they were this big believer in specialisms and believe, you can be a fantastic back-end developer. I think if you're doing web, you need to be able to work in the full stack, because otherwise it's very hard to deliver something. You would constantly become a dependency on someone else in your team, especially if you're in a small team, and I think small teams are best. You're going to be more flexible. I do think there's space. If you went and worked for a larger company, or you were doing hardware or something like that, you could probably specialize in a given area. But I think, I think the polyglot aspect, the language fluency, is really, really important. And if I were I were choosing what to get into now, if I was talking to myself at university, JavaScript is probably the way to go now. Every single thing has native JavaScript in it. We use it right through the stack on the server side. One of my good friends only works in JavaScript. But when I say JavaScript, I don't mean a framework. I don't mean Vue or React. Obviously, you can move on to that. I mean, learn bare bones native JavaScript.
Yeah. Well, that's really good advice. And so moving on to emerging technologies then, and yeah, we've talked a bit about JavaScript already. Have you got any other thoughts when you're thinking around what you guys are investing in, or more, or yourself when you're thinking around where technology is moving forward to? Where do you think the emerging technologies sit?
There's a few answers, I suppose. So, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that cloud is here to stay. Like, people have been saying that for about 10 years. So it's definitely here to stay. I guess at DecisionTech, we adopted cloud pretty early. And I think that there are a number of different levels that people use cloud in. So again, in emerging technologies, if you're picking anything up, I think DevOps is the future, and we have that embedded within our team. I think having automated pipelines, deployment pipelines, automated testing is really, really important. And I think as things evolve, we're going to get further and further abstracted away from the metal that's running the systems and be able to focus on the code much more. DecisionTech, if you go back 4 years, we were really struggling to deploy code. We did an analysis, and about 40–50% of the developers' time was going into getting deployments out, merging branches, fixing server problems, and that's just not a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that will become easier and easier with Kubernetes and similar things. I mean, understanding how Terraform works, picking up any of the other HashiCorp type tools is probably the way to go.
Yeah.
Already said JavaScript. I think JavaScript's also here to stay. I think that is the new fundamental for everything. And then, yeah, I suppose, I mean, emerging technologies is tricky because everything really still comes back to first principles. So you look at test-driven development, which was a big thing when I was trying to get a job, and everyone was asking about solid principles and design patterns, and those things are all still important. You go into a code academy and they teach you those things, and I guess now you're probably thinking, what relevance does this have to a job I'm going to get? Because people don't use it day to day. But test-driven development, it evolved to domain-driven development, it evolved to endpoint testing. It's now in continuous integration and continuous deployment. Like, the principle of having something automatically test your code and building in small repeatable sections isn't going away. It's just the emerging technology is more and more complex and abstracted ways of managing that for you.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, and testing is quite a good example. I was speaking to another CTO the other day, and their prediction was that with artificial intelligence, with AI, there could be a future where development is actually automated, where they're actually developing code is no longer needed by human and by the human intervention. So thinking around how to use AI and what the evolving job roles are, if a lot of the core development is effectively built by machine.
Haven't I seen that movie? Isn't that the one where the Terminators overthrow?
Yeah, I know. It's exactly, although he actually related it to, there's another film recently out, something about futuristic gaming, and that you live 20 hours within virtual reality. And
Ready Player One or something.
Mate, that's it. Yeah, but it's scary because that there is an aspect of that's the future. But thinking about that, when you think about navel gazing into, if you were a graduate and starting your university course, and so you're going to graduate in 3-4 years' time, what the future job roles might be, and we've talked a bit about DevOps, JavaScript being an underlying language. As a job spec or a job role, do you have any thoughts on what roles will occur in the future?
Interesting. So a friend of mine told me the other day, his dad gave him this advice. He said, if I could give you one bit of advice, he said, what I've noticed is that everybody around me that has good or successful jobs or careers, if I look at their job title, it was a job title I'd never heard of 5 to 10 years ago. So he was like, get into those niches. And I think that's good advice. I mean, it doesn't apply to job titles in development as much, but I think what works well is build some principles, obviously work out what motivates you, because otherwise it stops being enjoyable and you stop being motivated, it just becomes a job. And then I think you do need to specialize, but specialize in a way where you can pivot it. So I specialized in web development at VideoJug, but it was high performance websites. And they weren't e-commerce websites or marketing websites, but I was able to pivot that into price comparison and into other sectors and take the DevOps stuff. So I think you can be specific about the technology and the niche areas, but broad about what you approach. And equally, I think it's important to be open-minded about the type of things that you want to work on and the job title that you might want. Blinkering yourself into senior full stack developer could easily stop you from seeing other opportunities. And I think recruitment can become quite a big keyword game. You go and you look for your job on Google and you put your keywords in and you see all the different job listings. And I don't know what the answer is. I guess it's to work with a recruiter that can navigate that for you. But there's a lot more out there than just the specific titles that people are trying to shoot for.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more there. And, probably one of the last points for me, and you mentioned it earlier around you being a waiter for 2-3 months, and that gave you the soft skills. I think something I've seen as well is actually that's absolutely true now. Many companies now where technology is now the profit center, that it's no longer the support center to the business. The communication, and whether you are a junior tester all the way through to the CTO, the ability to be able to communicate with both the business and your co-developers or technical colleagues. I think that's probably more prevalent now than it ever has been. Is that something you see as well?
I definitely agree with that. My advice on that front would be I was never a very confident public speaker. So, working in kind of people-facing jobs helped me improve that, but nothing really prepares you for standing up in front of 100 people and public speaking. Like, the truth is, I'm sure you find this as well, you get nervous every single time you do it. It gets a little bit easier, but you've always got that adrenaline. So again, if I was looking back on me at university, I used to hate the presentation bits of the course, and you'd think, I just want to go for a job where I can keep my head down and I won't have to stand up and be that manager and lead people. And the reality is, you've just got to do it. Like, you have to communicate, start small. Everybody is in the same boat, and you've just got to plug away at it, and it gets easier.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think that it's healthy to have that increased adrenaline, no matter how many times you do it. But it gets a bit easier every time. And actually, it's the reward afterwards is being out of your comfort zone, isn't it? There's the element of achievement. So
the people that can communicate progress much faster than the people that can't. I mean, and that's not saying there is definitely still a space for the people that are slightly more introverted.
Yeah.
We do have, pure tech stacks if people don't want to manage, but we still try and encourage those senior developers. You have to be able to explain what you're doing, and you have to be able to bring people with you. I think it's important to learn how to do that.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, thank you. That's been really interesting and great to hear your story and the honesty of sort of going through the graduate recruitment company, starting at one business and how you pivoted it into DecisionTech. And I think your thoughts on, as we discussed about, looking at become a specialist, but in a generalist area, be able to pivot your skill set, communication, all of this is super relevant to the graduates that will be listening to this. So Richard, thank you. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Charlie.
Yeah, and that's another episode of Future Tech, posted on Spotify, our Arrows Group YouTube channel, and for the careers portals within the universities that we're partnered with. Thanks, everyone, and speak to you next time.